Hello G2 and welcome to week 5 of our series All Creation Awaits. This week we're going to be looking at recreation. We've all heard of creation, but recreation might be a new term. So we're going to be looking at what is it, who's doing it, what's it going to look like, and what's our role within that. As an overview, this series is looking at a biblical perspective on the climate crisis and God's renewing mission, and that mission has to involve transforming unjust structures and treasuring God's creation. And today we're going to be looking at the present day, and we're also going to be looking beyond. What's the eternal picture of recreation? What's going to happen at the end? Because the world tells us we're going to be extinct. But what's the story that the Bible teaches us? So today's reading is from Colossians 1, verse 15 to 23. And it looks at Jesus as the agent of creation, how he holds creation together, and then the role of the cross over recreation. In many ways, it's the gospel story. God made the earth and he loved it. Creation fell, and the cross will restore. And now we're going to look at after, when the world is completely renewed, what that's going to look like and how it's going to happen. The eternal recreation. So we're going to go straight into the reading now, but as you read it, have a consideration of the bigger picture of that gospel story and where Jesus is within it, because we often don't talk about Jesus within the context of creation itself. So have a read and I'll see you in a second. Brilliant. So let's have a little look at the context of this letter, just so you've got an idea of where we are in the bigger picture. So this is a letter written by Paul when he was in prison. And Colossia was a town that had heard about the gospel. Indirectly, Paul had never actually been there, but he had a friend there called Ephesus. And basically, Ephesus came to the prison and said, it's going really well, things are great, people are following Jesus, but there are some pressures that might lead them away from God. So Paul wrote this letter to them from prison, and its primary message is talking about the supremacy of Christ. The first half of our reading talks about Jesus as the King and author of creation, and the second half talks about how he's going to bring about a new creation through the cross. So let's go through the reading in a bit of greater detail to unpack some of the language used. So verse 15, the Son is the image of the invisible God. So Jesus is the incarnate of God himself, Yahweh. So we're talking about the Trinity here. The firstborn over all creation. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Jesus was born before Yahweh? Was Jesus born before creation? So no, this is not a literal use of the firstborn. Jesus was not born before God the Father, but rather he has the rights and privileges of the firstborn son. So it's about the royal status, his royal status over all creation. He is supreme. So he's the firstborn, meaning he's the most significant over all of creation. Verse 16, for in him all things were created, things on heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, so physical and non-physical. All things have been created through him and for him. So it says created. He shares the identity in the one true creator, Yahweh. All things were created through him and for him. He was there at creation and he is the goal of creation. He created and it was made to worship him. In verse 17, it says that he is also the sustainer of everything. He holds everything together. So he created, it's made to glorify him, and he sustains it. So in summary, we see that Jesus is the King and the author of all of creation. Now, the next bit starts talking about recreation, but before we go into that, I maybe want to touch on this second part of the gospel where creation fell, where we had the fall, because this is kind of maybe what we're witnessing and what we're talking about. We're talking about the climate crisis, which is here and now, where we're seeing consequences of the fall. Sin is present in our lives. So let's look at Genesis in order to look forward to recreation. So in Genesis, everything was brilliant. God made the earth and it was good. There was no sin. And then Adam and Eve took the apple, and at that point, the whole of creation fell. Creation was perfect, then it wasn't. Now, there are several impacts of the fall, impacting the brokenness of the world that we see today, including the climate crisis. So ultimately, when we sinned, we cannot be in the presence of God. We departed from God's presence. And with that, our relationship with God was tarnished, and we were separated from God's primary purposes for humanity. So with that, humans fell. We're no longer in perfect unity with God. Our desires, our will and behaviour is no longer unified with God's will for his creation. So this means that suffering and pain enters the world through direct human action. We burn too many fossil fuels. In excess and greed, sea levels therefore rise, and there are floods and lots of human suffering. So there's a direct impact of human behaviour causing the climate crisis. And then there's another angle that creation itself fell. So the earth doesn't function in the way that it was originally created. So for an example, Genesis talks about pain and childbirth. That's not a direct cause that we are directly doing with our behaviour, but is an example of how the natural world suffers because of the fall. We learn about diseases, we learn about ways that creation fell because of the fall. And our relationship, therefore, with creation was tarnished. In Genesis, Adam was called to be in unity. Well, they were in unity with creation, and therefore their intentions were. He was called to attend and work the garden. He was called to steward and look after the earth, not to consume the garden or to burn it, but to look after it. And we see now that we don't respect and honour creation in the same way. Climate change and our relationship with it is very complicated in terms of what causes what. One example is this area of the world called the Ring of Fire near Japan, where there are 4 tectonic plates they meet. And where that is, basically it causes a lot of tsunamis, earthquakes and horrific natural disasters to people who live nearby. Interestingly, on an ecological level, there are lots of other things that happen there that are essential to the Earth's life cycle. So there's lots of geochemical cycling. I'm just going to get the right words up so I don't say something wrong here. And it's to do with the volcanic eruptions that are important for the atmospheric cycling. So there are lots of essential Earth processes going on there. So this shows that actually what's gone wrong is that people are living there, that these Earth cycles are essential and they've always been going on there. But there's something wrong that people are suffering because they're living near this Earth cycle, this Earth process that is causing suffering. So our relationship with creation is not how God intended. People shouldn't be living there. We can't use the Earth however we want to. But it's also an example of how we don't honour each other, because this is a social injustice issue. The poorest people suffer the most. I assume people have to live there because of their livelihoods, because of money. I don't think anybody would choose to live in a natural disaster, in an area of natural disaster. So in summary, when the fall happens, our relationship with the fall, suffering and climate crisis is really complicated. Our human nature needs redeeming, creation itself needs redeeming, and our relationship with creation needs redeeming. Now, stanza 2 of our reading explores how this redemption has to come through unity with God himself. Our relationship with God and God's unity with earth, with us, and with creation is the way forward, because he has the best intentions for creation. Great. So now that we've kind of spoken a bit about creation, the fall, we're now going to start looking at the cross and what recreation is. So we're going to be continuing within Colossians. And in the second part, we're going from verse 18. We're going to be looking at how Jesus is the one bringing about a new creation. And this is going to come through unity with God himself through the cross. So in verse 18, it says that Jesus is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. So he resurrected. He's the first person to come into this new creation, so that in everything he might have supremacy. So it says that he's the head of the body. So the body refers to people who follow him into this new creation, his followers, us, the church. So he's the head, yes, and we're the body. And this means that we can be a part of his resurrection. We can follow in Jesus's footsteps through the resurrection into a new creation and a new life. It says in verse 19, for God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in Jesus, in him, and to reconcile himself to all things. So here we're talking about God has his dwellness, his fullness dwell in Jesus. And through Jesus, he reconciles himself to all things, whether on heaven or on earth, making peace through his blood shed on the cross. So what we're seeing is that the fullness of God can dwell on heaven and in earth again through Jesus, through what he did on the cross. He is unifying us. He is bringing us back into his presence. And through that, he is reconciling, he's redeeming creation. He's redeeming us, and he's redeeming our relationship with him and with creation. So through Jesus, who is supreme over all creation, whom everything was created for, that who creation is sustained by, he will reconcile us and bring us out to a recreation through the cross. And through this reconciliation, through what Jesus did, we can enter the presence of God again. We can be reconciled to God, because all things in heaven and in earth can be reconciled through his blood on the cross. Verse 21, for once you were alienated from God and your enemies in your mind because of your evil behavior. Verse 22, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you in his holy sight without blemish and free from accusation. This is the gospel that you have heard and has been proclaimed to every creature, not just humans, to every creature under the heaven. So here we're seeing this beautiful picture. There's a change of the story. The first part said Jesus is the agent of creation. And secondly, he is the agent of recreation, and we are invited to be a part of that story. The end of the story isn't extinction. The end of the story, the climate crisis, isn't extinction. We are going to be recreated. God is going to recreate the earth, and we're going to be free from the suffering that we see. And that's going to come through the blood of Jesus. But if we have this story of hope, this different story, where are we invited to participate if Jesus is going to do it all? If he's going to recreate it through his blood, then what do we do? A few years ago, I kind of tackled this question for myself, and not in a malicious way of trying to get out of being a steward, but in a way of, like, I guess, an existential way of, Jesus, what's my role in all of this? If you've got an eternal plan of redemption, what can I be doing now? So the answer to this question lies in a bit of an assumption that we all have, and we all will answer this question differently. And the challenge is what's going to happen to our works when Jesus comes back and redeems and recreates the world? Where is it going to be? Is this new heaven and new earth, is it going to be on another planet? Or are we all just going to be we'll all die one day and then we're just going to go to a new one and a better one, and that's over here. Or the other option is that we stay in this earth and things are going to be fulfilled and redeemed. Or maybe you think something else. Have a little ponder on that. And then in your groups, we're going to explore this from a biblical perspective to start getting a few answers. So this is Revelation 21. So have a little think and then give it a read together. So the whole way through this, we are looking at restoration, not replacement, but restoration. It says that heaven and earth will be united and God will dwell among his people. And God's presence is the redemption. Through God's presence, all things will be renewed and all things will be redeemed. It says in verse 1 that he saw a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth were passed away and there was no more sea. Just to touch on that, it says no more sea. That's a bit confusing. Not literally no more sea. This is symbolic. The absence of sea points to the removal of chaos, death, in evil, which sea represents in the book of Revelation. So, and there was no more sea means there was no more chaos, evil and death. And so what we do here does matter because we are being redeemed and it is not a replacement. The thing that's going to change is that God is going to fully dwell. He's going to his presence is going to be fully united with us again, and his creation and his people are going to dwell in this new earth, in this new heaven, in this new earth. And it's new because God renewed it. He's redeemed it. It says in verse 3, and I heard a voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be with them and will be their God. And therefore God will wipe away tears from all of their eyes. There will be no more pain, no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, and the former things are passed away. So I want to highlight two things. 1, continuity, it's redemption, not replacement. And 2, the ultimate hope is knowing Jesus, that he's the agent of creation and he's the agent of recreation, and that we are invited to be a part of this recreation through what he's done for us. So Jesus has already won the victory, but there are many battles to be participated in now. We are called to be stewards. We are called to bear God's image. And this invitation to participate can look so different for all of us. But this is God's vision, that we can have hope. And there's an invitation to be a part of his story of recreation here on earth, rather than being passive about it. We are replacing fear with stewardship and hope. We don't have to be scared of extinction. And instead we can ask, how do we be stewards? How can we join in what God is doing and in recreation? I'm going to put some questions on the screen now for you all to discuss in your small group. Maybe take some time to pray if there's anything that's stirred in you. Hello, welcome to my kitchen. I wanted to finish the talk by summarising what we've learned through an analogy. It's not perfect by any means, but hopefully it'll help you see the bigger picture and to start to see how it all fits together in the big story of hope that Jesus is giving us. So, as we spoke about at the start of creation, we were sin-free. The clearness of this oil represents how things were perfect. Creation was good. We dwelt in the presence of God in his fullness. Creation and our relationship with creation was perfect. And then Adam and Eve took the apple. I've lost my balsamic vinegar. Here we go. And sin entered the world. Now, you can see here, the balsamic vinegar represents the sin, that they are separated. So it's not that God can't be in the presence of sin, but sin separates us from God. It draws us away from him. We can no longer be in perfect unity with him. And we spoke about that how not being in perfect unity impacts our relationship with the earth, it impacts our behaviour, it impacts our relationship with God. So here we see the fall. And then, I'll just put the sin back in, because this is where we are today. Jesus died on the cross, and through his blood, we can have unity with God again. Jesus' blood, otherwise known as English mustard. And you can see that through the Holy Spirit, through Jesus' cross, through his death on the cross, through his blood, we can dwell in unity with God. Now, it's not that what Jesus did was only in part, because we get to experience his full glory. What he did was in full, and we are fully presented to the Holy Spirit, but the world hasn't been fully restored, and we await full union with him. Now, this is where Revelation comes in. Revelation is this promise of full redemption, this promise of a sin-free, pain-free world where Jesus is going to wipe away all of our tears. And it's through his cross and through us receiving his cross that we can enter into this new heaven, this new earth, this new Jerusalem with him. The promise and the story of hope is that he is going to redeem the whole of creation. Now, the story that the world tells us isn't actually here. It's just full balsamic. There is no hope. It's extinction. Whereas we can hold on to this story of hope that Jesus he has conquered death, and that he is going to redeem the earth, and we are going to live in full wellness and within his presence, and the whole of creation is going to be restored and recreated.